The Thanksgiving turkey was still steaming when my younger sister raised her crystal goblet, her face glowing with the triumphant look of a woman who had just won the lottery. She announced that our parents were officially signing the entire family estate over to her, meaning I was getting absolutely nothing. The dining room instantly erupted into a chaotic wave of roaring cheers, enthusiastic whistles, and ecstatic applause from our extended relatives. I did not blink, I did not cry, and I certainly did not join the applause, choosing instead to offer a calm, knowing smile as the storm unfolded. Lowering my silver fork deliberately against the porcelain plate, I looked directly across the table at my father and asked softly if he wanted to explain the reality of the situation, or if I should do it for him. A house built on silences. Before I reveal the explosive truth that shattered our family that evening, I want to ask where you are listening from tonight, because finding others who have survived toxic family dynamics helps ease the isolation. My name is Julia, and if you had observed my family prior to that fateful holiday dinner, you would have assumed we were the absolute definition of Midwestern perfection. We were the people who wore matching sweaters on holiday cards and smiled flawlessly, hiding the bitter truth that we were completely fractured underneath the surface. My family did not break in a sudden, dramatic explosion, but rather cracked slowly over decades through the quiet moments of who was always fiercely protected and who was entirely cast aside. The golden child and the shadow. For as long as I can remember, I existed entirely in the background, only noticed by my parents whenever they required assistance or needed someone to blame. My younger sister Carolyn never experienced that loneliness because she was the undisputed golden child, captivating everyone with her effortless charm and bubbly personality. I never truly hated her for receiving all the affection, but I recognized early on that I would have to build my own future because nothing would ever be handed to me. My parents constantly poured every ounce of their emotional and financial resources into Carolyn, funding expensive dance classes and private lessons while claiming we were entirely broke whenever I asked for anything. The only real lie. When I finally escaped to Chicago to establish my independent career, my parents furiously labeled my departure as a selfish betrayal of the family. Meanwhile, Carolyn remained safely in their pocket, visiting them every single weekend and perfectly maintaining the flawless illusion they had crafted for her. The only reason I continued returning home for the holidays was my grandmother, Clara, a brilliant and sharp-witted woman who was the only relative to look at me with genuine respect. Whenever she embraced me at the front door, she would gently pat my cheek and whisper that I was far stronger than the rest of them realized. Signs of a setup. This particular Thanksgiving felt entirely wrong from the moment I stepped across the threshold, as the atmosphere inside the house felt thick with a hidden agenda. My mother was frantically pacing around the kitchen with a tense, artificial smile, while my father completely refused to make direct eye contact with me. Carolyn kept nervously adjusting her expensive designer dress, and when I walked into the dining room, I noticed my designated chair had been completely removed from the table. It was as if they were trying to erase my presence before the dinner even started, signaling a confrontation that I knew was coming. The hidden trap. The tension only escalated once we sat down, as conversations completely died out the exact moment I walked into the room, replacing normal chatter with forced laughter. Carolyn floated around the space like a celebrity, adjusting the centerpieces and whispering secrets to my mother while tossing me cold, hollow glances. This bitter division had evolved over years, shifting from childhood days of sharing a bedroom and passing secrets to a cold reality where she was the star and I was invisible. The true origin of this holiday ambush had actually begun 6 months earlier on a humid Saturday afternoon when my parents desperately summoned me home. Uncovering the fraud, they had ushered me to the dining table where my father presented a thick folder, falsely claiming they just needed my signature for a routine housing refinance. My intuition immediately flared, so I refused to sign on the spot and insisted on taking the legal documents back to my attorney in Chicago. The following morning, my lawyer called with a grim voice, revealing that the documents were actually a complete transfer of massive financial liability. My parents were drowned in a secret second mortgage, facing immediate foreclosure, and they had attempted to legally bind me to their catastrophic debt. Wrapping a bomb in a bow, 2 months later, my father called me begging for cash under the guise of medical bills, but he completely fell apart when I offered to pay the hospital directly. Sitting at the Thanksgiving table watching Carolyn celebrate, I realized my parents were passing the crushing debt to her since I had refused to be swindled. They were wrapping a financial bomb in a holiday bow, expecting me to sit quietly while my sister unknowingly ruined her financial future. I had spent the previous week pulling public property records, organizing overdue notices and foreclosure warnings into a folder tucked inside my bag. Lifting the curtain, when Carolyn stood up and announced that Emily gets nothing, she was glowing under the dining room lights, completely unaware of the trap beneath her feet. The room went wild with cheers, and my aunt even patted my father on the back while my mother wept tears of pride. I simply stared at my sister, allowed a cold smile to cross my face, and delivered the calm question that instantly froze the room. The celebratory noise vanished instantly, replaced by a suffocating silence where the only sound was my father accidentally dropping his fork onto his plate. Exposing the truth, I reached into my bag, placed the thick folder on the table like a quiet weapon, and told the room they should examine the actual condition of the house. My father furiously tried to silence me, but I openly revealed that our parents were months away from total foreclosure due to massive mortgages. I slid the bold financial summary toward Carolyn, whose face instantly turned pale as she demanded to know what debt I was talking about. I looked her dead in the eye and asked if our parents mentioned that her new inheritance came with over $100,000 of debt. The gathering storm. My father lunged forward to grab the paperwork, but I pulled it back safely out of his reach as my mother began sobbing into her napkin. The surrounding relatives shifted uncomfortably in their seats, their expressions turning from celebratory joy to utter confusion and growing anger at the deception. Aunt Diane broke the silence, sharply demanding to know if the allegations were true, but my father could only clench his jaw in silent defeat. I looked at Carolyn and gently explained that the house was never a gift, but rather an escape route for our parents to dump their financial ruin. The real fallout. Carolyn stood frozen and trembling in her dress while her fiancé, Tyler, visibly pulled his chair away from her in absolute disgust. Tyler confronted my parents about their lies, shaking his head in disbelief before declaring that he refused to marry into a sinking ship of financial ruin. He stormily walked out of the house, leaving Carolyn to collapse into her chair, her mascara running down her face as she whispered that she didn't know. My father slammed his fist down, screaming that I had ruined everything, but I countered that he ruined this family the moment he weaponized his debt against his own children. The final unraveling. Grandmother Clara stood up slowly, using the table for balance, and sternly told my father that his daughters were not lifeboats for his own failures. Just as the confrontation reached its peak, a loud, authoritative knock echoed through the house, and an investigator stepped inside to question my parents regarding potential financial misconduct. My mother collapsed into hysterics, begging me to tell the officer it was all a misunderstanding, but I remained perfectly silent as the truth finally landed. In the following weeks, the house was sold, my parents moved into a tiny apartment, and Carolyn finally entered therapy to break the cycle of illusion. A lesson in truth. Carolyn now calls me regularly to talk, finally understanding why I refused to let our parents control our narrative or speak for us anymore. I ultimately learned that exposing the truth is never an act of betrayal, but keeping destructive secrets to protect abusers always leads to total ruin. If you have ever had to stand completely alone against a room full of people who claim to love you, please tell me your location. After listening to how I handled my family, I want to know what you would have done in my position.